In today's lesson, we're going to start working on your assignment number 1, which is simple shapes. First, you need to go to your Blackboard, course documents, and download the PDF called Simple Shapes, which is the file you're looking at right now. So the first part of the assignment will be done today, and then the rest of the assignment, starting with the zigzag, will be done next lesson. So today we're going to focus on this part. So in this exercise, you're going to learn how to create these shapes using Shapes tool and line segment tools. We're going to learn how to recolor them, move them, rotate them, delete them, resize them, and we're going to create the objects that you can see on your screen. I would like to make sure that you create these shapes and try to make them in the same size, the same color, and the same orientation as close as possible. So this way I will know and be able to check to make sure that you have learned how to move, recolor, resize, and create these objects. You don't have to worry about it too much. I mean, it doesn't have to be exactly the same as mine, but you should try to get a similar size and a similar color as close as possible. When it comes to the lines, it doesn't really matter how many you have, as long as you have a few horizontal lines, a few vertical lines, a few 45-degree angle lines, and as long as you have a few arcs. But again, the placement of the lines doesn't have to be exactly the same, and the number of the lines doesn't have to be the same. As far as the shapes go, I do want you to try to get the size and the color and the placement as close as possible to this handout, so that I can make sure that you have learned how to work with the tools I'm going to introduce. So I'm going to minimize the PDF by clicking on the yellow button, so this way it'll be accessible later on. As I work on the assignment, I can go back and refer to it to double check the color and what shapes I'm supposed to draw. So now I'm going to go back to my Illustrator file, and I will go to File, New, to create a new file. I'm going to click on the Print tab to select Printing Quality Setup. I'm going to click on the letter size preset. So this is the tab I'm going to click on. Then I'm going to go to units and change it to inches. This allows me to double check to make sure I've got 8.5 inches by 11 inches paper size, which is correct. So that'll be the size of my artboard. And then you can see it's already selected the portrait orientation. So portrait orientation is the vertical paper orientation, so that's what I'm going to use today for my assignment. The preset for artboards is 1, so it's just one blank page or one single white workspace area, and that's all I need. And finally, I'm going to click on More on the Advanced options. So see the Advanced options, you're going to click on that in order to expand the menu, and you're just going to double check to make sure that the raster effects is set to high, 300 pixels per inch. If it's not, then you just have to make sure that you select 300 pixels per inch. Once all of this is done, then you click on the button that says Create, and then you will see your single artboard. That's portrait orientation, and it's a letter size page. If you need a refresher on how to start, set up a file, navigate, and save, you can go back to lesson number 2 on YouTube and then watch it again. So now I'm going to just go back to the upper right side corner and make sure that it says Essential Classic here from the drop-down menu. So if it's not selected, make sure you select that so that you'll have all of the options and all of the tools available. Here you can see the name of your file. For now it says Untitled. So why don't we just go to File, Save As, and save it You can save it on your USB or your desktop, but the file name is going to start with your family name. So Dobrik, then underscore, then simple underscore shapes. So that'll be the file name. And then you can save it on a desktop or your USB. You can choose from the menu where. And then the default will be already preset. So it says Adobe Illustrator AI. So I want to keep it as AI format. And then I just have to click on Save. After you click on the Save button, a dialog box will come up and it should say Illustrator CC, so that's already preset for me and I don't have to change it. And then I simply just have to click on the OK button and I'm done. So now my file is saved. As I draw, I can always go to Command S or Control S in order to save my file. So you would click Control S at the same time, and then that is the shortcut for file save. I'm just going to minimize my Illustrator window so that I can go back and make sure that my file is saved. So you can see on my desktop, I do have Dobrik Simple Shapes icon and it says AI. So that means it is correct file format. It is in Adobe Illustrator format. So I'm all good. I can continue working. So the first thing we're going to do after you make sure you have Essential Classic selected is go and select the shape tools, and then we're going to pull out the submenu for the shape tools, the flyout menu. So I can see that the rectangle tool has a tiny little triangle on the bottom right corner. So that means there are additional tools hidden that I can pull out. So the way you're going to tear off the flyout menu is click at the tiny little triangle with the left mouse button, keep it pressed, and then simply drag across until the bar highlights black, and then you can let go of your mouse at that point. And then you can just simply drag the menu over by clicking on top of the bar. Next, I'm going to do the same thing with my line segment tool. So there is another way to tear off the flyout menu, and this time I'm going to just click once. The box shows up, then I will drag to the edge. When the bar highlights black, I'm going to click on it, and then I can drag over the box. Okay, so those are two different ways of pulling out the submenus. So just please practice that and make sure it works for you. So next, I'm going to start drawing some shapes. So basically, I'm going to first click on the rectangle tool. And the way rectangle tool works, as well as all of these other tools, is that you use the left mouse button and then you click and drag diagonally going down. And then as you click and drag, you keep your mouse pressed. And then once you're happy with the size of your object, then you let go. So now I have one object drawn. The same thing with the oval tool or star tool or anything else. So for example, if I click on the oval tool, I click and drag with the left mouse and I drag diagonally going down, and then I let go. Okay, so now you can simply create a whole bunch of shapes and notice that their size and placement is determined by the amount that you drag. So next we're going to have a look and see how we can move them. So to move them, you can use the black arrow, which is the selection tool. So I'm going to click once on the black arrow, the selection tool, and then I'm going to click on my rectangle. As you click on the rectangle, you're going to notice a bounding box show up. So the bounding box indicates that the shape is selected. And if I want to deselect the shape, I'm just going to click anywhere outside of the shape, and now the shape is no longer selected. So what can you do when the shape is selected? Many things. So again, if I click on the black arrow and I click on the shape, the bounding box will show up. So at this point I can move the object by clicking and dragging it around the page. So you keep your mouse pressed until you are happy with the new location of your object, and then you let go of your left click mouse. Another thing I can do is I can just hit delete. So if the object is selected, I can hit delete or backspace to get rid of it. The other thing that I can do also is I can recolor it. So if I select my circle, a bounding box shows up again, and then from the options bar I can choose a different fill. So the first box you see on the left side is the fill box. So I can just choose different fill from the drop down menu. So you just click on the tiny little triangle, the menu expands, and then you select a new color. Next, you're going to see the stroke box. So the stroke box refers to the outline or the edge of the shape that you can see right now is black. But if I click on the tiny little triangle, the menu will expand and I can change the color to any color that I want. So in this case, I'm going to use a red stroke. And so you can see it better, I'm going to go and select a thicker line stroke. So stroke menu expands after you click on the tiny little triangle, and you can choose a thicker line. So for example, I'm going to choose 14-point stroke, and then the line becomes really thick. So to deselect this object, when you're done, you just click outside of the object and then the object will get deselected. To move it, again, you use the black arrow, you click on the object and you move it. To delete it, again, you select the object and you hit delete or backspace. If you, from some reason, cannot see the options bar here on top of your screen, then what you have to do is go to Window, Properties. So Window Properties will bring out the Properties box, which will also show you the color of stroke and the fill. So if I click on this object, I can see the fill, the stroke, and the line thickness in the Properties box. So if I want to change the fill, I can also do it from here. If I want to change the stroke and the stroke thickness, I can also do it from here again as well. Okay, so if you don't see the options bar, which I have here on top, then in that case, you can recolor your object by going to Window, Properties, and then you're going to select the object and then change the fill and then change the stroke. So it really depends on what version you have of Illustrator, that you might have to go to Window Properties in order to recolor the object. So let me just recolor these objects, and it's very quick and easy. Again, go to the drop-down menu, change the stroke, change the fill, and you can change the thickness of the stroke as well. Okay, so next we're going to learn how to rotate an object and how to resize the object. So for example, I want to change the size of this rectangle. So first I need to use the black arrow, select this rectangle, and then I can resize it simply by clicking and dragging anywhere on this bounding box. Okay, if I want to rotate it, then the same thing. I use the black arrow, I select my object, and then I let go of my mouse. Once I move my cursor closer to the upper corner or any corner of the rectangle, then you're going to see a double-sided arrow. So the double-sided arrow is the rotating arrow. So if you now click and drag the bounding box, then you can rotate your object. So Control Z or Command Z is to undo. So if I undo, then the object will go back to the original position. So Command Z, if you're a Mac user, is undo, and if you're a PC user, it's going to be Control Z to undo. So you can hit Control Z or Command Z many times, and then it's going to undo whatever you did many times. So again, to rotate an object, you're going to select it with the black arrow. You are going to let go of the mouse. You're going to move your mouse to the corner. Once you see the double-headed arrow, then you're going to press your mouse and drag the bounding box corner in order to rotate your object. Command Z will undo it. As you were resizing the object, you have probably noticed that you can easily change the proportion of the object, which could be good, but it also could be a problem. So I will give you a little tip. If you would, for example, like to change the size of this circle, but you would like to keep the proportion of the circle, then you have to press Shift and keep it pressed down as you drag the corner of the bounding box in order to resize it. So if I press Shift and I click and drag with the black arrow, the corner of the bounding box, I keep dragging it out, then I'm resizing my circle. However, because I'm pressing Shift continuously, I am able to constrain the proportion. If you do not press Shift and you try to resize it without pressing Shift, then you're going to probably distort the proportion of the object. So a rule to remember is if you have a button, for example, that you want to resize, then you have to press Shift when you're resizing it, because otherwise you're probably going to lose the proper proportion of your object. Another example where you can use Shift tool is when you're trying to select multiple objects. So if I select the black arrow and if I click on the one object, then if I click on another object, then the previous object will get unselected. So if you want to select more than one object at a time, you have to press Shift. So I'm going to press Shift and select 3 of these rectangles. I keep Shift pressed the entire time. So I still have my Shift pressed down, and now I have selected 5 objects. Again, if you want to select more than one object, you have to press Shift and you have to keep it pressed down. Selecting multiple objects now allows me to recolor them all at a time, or I could just hit delete and delete them all at the same time. Again, if you want to select more than one object, you have to press Shift and keep it pressed down. Another way to select multiple objects would be to use the black arrow and then simply click and drag around all of the objects that you wish to select. So I'm going to click and drag, and you can sort of see sort of like a bounding box shows up, and I drag diagonally. Once I have enclosed all of the objects that I wish to select, then I can let go of the drag, and now I have all of them selected. Again, to deselect, you just click anywhere in the empty part of the artboard. One more time, you're going to use the black arrow and then click and drag with the black arrow across in order to select multiple objects. And then you can delete, recolor, or move them, or resize them. Okay, so there's 2 ways to select multiple objects. One is to press Shift and then click on each object, and the other way is to simply click and drag a bounding box around all of the objects you wish to select. Let's just refresh our memory about navigation. So we remember from before, Control minus or Command minus is to zoom out. Command 0 or Control 0 is to zoom into the entire artboard size. And then if you click on Control plus or Command plus, then you're going to zoom in. So every time you hit Control plus, you're going to zoom in. Every time you hit Control minus or Command minus, you're going to zoom out. And then Control 0 will give you the whole artboard. Again, a little refresher, if you want to zoom in to a particular shape, you can just click and drag with the zoom tool, or keep clicking with the zoom tool and it'll keep zooming in. If you press Option key or the Alt key, and you click with the zoom tool, then you're going to be zooming out. Okay, so that's just a refresher from the previous lecture. So I'm going to hit Command 0 to just display my entire artboard. At this point, I have enough knowledge to actually complete the first part of the assignment. So I'm going to use the black arrow and click and drag around all of these objects in order to delete them. And I will now start working on the actual assignment. So if you look at the handout, we first have the rectangles. So first I'm going to preset my color to yellow fill, and I'm going to use a red stroke, so you can preset it. And I'm going to choose a little bit thicker line. It doesn't have to be exactly as mine, it can be just approximate, but the color and the size and the shape should be as close as possible to the handout I gave you. So with the rectangle tool, I'm just going to click and drag, and here is my first shape done. You can hit Control S to save or Command S to save. That is the shortcut for save. The next shape I have is going to be a rectangle. So I will press Shift in order to constrain the proportion. So if you want a perfect rectangle, you can use the rectangle tool, but you have to press Shift in order to get a perfect square with equal sides. So first I'm going to press Shift and keep the mouse pressed the entire time. Then I will start clicking and dragging going down diagonally, and then I will let go. So now I have a perfect square. This square should be blue inside with green edge, so I'm going to just go to blue fill, and I'm going to change the stroke to green, and I'm going to make the stroke a little bit thicker, and then that's that. And then using the black arrow, I just click outside anywhere on the empty part of the artboard, and then the shape will deselect. So as you have noticed, I can pre-select the colors I want before I start drawing a shape, or I can draw a shape, have it selected, and then go to the drop-down menu for stroke and fill and change the color later on. There is another way to use the circle tool and the rectangle tool and all of the other tools. Instead of clicking and dragging, you can actually also tell the computer exactly what size you would like to draw for your square or your rectangle or your circle. So I'll just give you a quick example of that. So I'm going to click on the rectangle tool, and then using the left mouse, I'm just going to click once anywhere on the artboard, and then a dialog box. So this time I can actually enter 2 inches by 2 inches, and then the computer is going to give me a square that's 2 inches by 2 inches. So when you know the exact size of the object you want to draw, instead of clicking and dragging, you can actually select the tool you want, click once, and then tell the computer the exact size in inches that you would like to draw. So here I have 3 inches width, 3 inches height, and then I click OK, and then the computer will give me the specific size that I want. So for this assignment, you don't really have to use this, but you will use this later on when you create your color swatches and fabric swatches, and then you may wish to specify a certain size of the rectangle you wish to get. Next, we're going to draw a triangle. So we're going to use the polygon tool to draw a triangle. So the polygon tool works different ways as well. You can click and drag and it gives you a polygon, or if you just click once with the left mouse, computer's going to ask you how many sides you want your polygon to have. Do you want 6? Do you want 10? Do you have 3? So I want to have 3 because the triangle has 3 sides. So we're going to enter 3 for the number of sides, and then in terms of radius, we can keep it as is because you can always resize it later. So once you have entered 3 sides, you're going to click on OK. And then if it's too big or too small, you can press Shift to constrain the proportion, and then use Shift and drag diagonally in order to make it bigger, or smaller. The only thing is the color should be white fill and purple outline. So I'm going to change it to white fill and purple outline, and then I'm done. So one more time for the triangle, you take the polygon tool, you click, and then once you click with the with the left mouse click, you're going to enter the number of sides you want, and then you're going to click OK. Next, I need to draw a polygon with 6 sides. So I will click once with the polygon tool with the left button. The dialog box will come up. I will enter 6 sides this time. So you type in number 6 and then you click OK. So now I have a polygon with 6 sides, and I should just change the line to be blue and a little bit thinner compared to this. Again, it doesn't have to be exactly like mine, but approximately. This way I will be able to tell whether you learned how to change the properties of an object. So that's it. Next, we are going to create an oval. So the oval is going to be green fill and no stroke. So if you want to pre-select that, you can. So I'm going to pre-select green fill and no stroke. So no stroke is going to give you a shape with a green fill, but it'll have no stroke. It'll have no outline. So to select no stroke, you have to click on the first box, which is none. So it looks like a square with a red line going across. So that is the no stroke box. So that's what I'm going to pre-select. So now if I click and drag with the oval tool, I'm going to get a shape with no stroke and with a green fill. And here it is. Next object has to have blue outline, white fill, and it needs to be perfect circles. So we know from before that you have to press Shift when you draw with the oval tool in order to get a circle. So I'm going to pre-select blue stroke, fairly thin, but let's change it to 5. And then white fill. So I'm going to click on the oval tool, and then I'm going to click and drag with a Shift press down. So press Shift down, click and drag diagonally going down, and then you're going to get a perfect circle. Once you're done, let go of your Shift and let go of your mouse, and then you're done with the perfect circle. Then you can just move it, you can resize it, and then you're done. Next, we need to use the star tool. So the star tool is the same. You can click and drag to create a shape, or you can click once to get a dialog box where you can tell the computer how many points you wish to have. So in my case, I actually want to have 12 points. I'm not going to change the radius because I can easily resize the object later on, but I will make sure that I type in 12 for points and then I click OK. So here is my star with 12 points. I'm going to change the fill to red, and I'm going to change the stroke to black, and then I'm going to deselect it. And that is it for this portion of the assignment. I could just make my stroke a little bit thinner. So again, you can just have a look at the PDF and try to make sure that your objects look as similar as possible to the PDF handout that I gave you. Now I'm just going to go to Command S to save, or Control S to save, and then I will continue working with the line segment tools. Before we look at this line segment tools, I just want to go over objects that have no fill and no stroke. So for example, if I draw a star here, and if I have no stroke, you're still going to see the star because it's got a fill. But what happens if I create a star with no fill? So if you go to the fill box and you select no fill, which is this white square with a red line going across. So if you click on that, then your object is going to have no fill and it's going to have no stroke. I can still see it because it's selected. But if I deselect that object then I'm not going to see it anymore. So in order for you to see an object that you drew, it has to have either fill or stroke or both. But if it doesn't have stroke or fill, then you're not going to see it unless you select it. So if I use the black arrow and I click on the object, then I will actually see it. It's still here. So right now it's got no fill and no stroke. And then again, in order for me to see it, it has to have either fill or stroke or both, okay? So just be aware that the object you draw can have fill, stroke, or both, or none. If it has none, then you basically can't even see it unless you select it. Another thing that I would like to point out is that an object that doesn't have fill cannot be moved by clicking on it and dragging it because it's got no fill. So in order to move an object that has no fill, you would actually have to click on the edge of the stroke in order to move it. Whereas an object that does have fill can be moved by clicking on it and then dragging it to a new location. And then if you're trying to select and move an object that doesn't have fill, it's actually not going to move because it's got no fill. So if it's got no fill, you have to click on the edge of the stroke in order to move it. Okay, so just one thing that could be confusing is that if you don't have fill and stroke, then you're actually not going to see what you're drawing, which sometimes gets students confused. Okay, so now I'm going to just save, Command S, and I have saved this part of the assignment. Next, we're going to look at the line segment tool, the spiral, and the arc tool. So for these, I really don't need to have a fill, so I'm going to take fill to none. I'm going to use black stroke, and then I can use maybe 3-point stroke so you guys can see what I'm drawing easier. If I hit spacebar, then I'm going to temporarily switch to the hand tool. When I let go of the spacebar, I'm going to go back to whatever tool was selected before. So now I'm going to click once on the line segment tool, and then you simply just click and drag to draw a line in any direction you want. If you press Shift, the computer is going to give you perfectly horizontal lines. So keep the Shift pressed if you want to draw horizontal lines. If you want to draw vertical lines, then you press Shift and then keep it pressed, and then you will get perfectly vertical lines. If you want to draw a line that's at 45-degree angle, you also have to press Shift, and then that allows you to draw lines at 45-degree angle. If you want to draw the arc, you simply click and drag, and then that'll give you some arcs. And then for the spiral, you're going to use the spiral or the spiral tool, and then you're just going to click and drag to create the spiral. It's going to have white fill and it's going to have green stroke, so I can change that, and I can make it a little bit thicker if I want. There, and then using the black arrow I can just move it around. Now for your assignment, you don't have to have as many lines all over the place, so you could delete them if you want. So I can press Shift and then click on one at a time, and then keep the Shift pressed to keep selecting more and more, and then I can hit delete. Another way to select multiple objects, whether they're rectangles or lines or whatever, we have learned before, and this is simply to click and drag with the black arrow, which will then create a selection for you, and then you just have to click delete. Okay, when you use that technique, just make sure that you're not accidentally selecting more than what you need. So I'm using the black arrow. I'm clicking and dragging a bounding box around these lines. Diagonally, I'm dragging going up, and then I let go. So now I have all these lines selected, and then I hit delete. If you find this is not precise enough, you can just always use Shift and then only select one object at the time instead. Okay, so there's two ways to select multiple objects. So for my assignment, if I refer back to my original, it looks pretty similar. Again, the lines don't have to look exactly the same, and the number of lines don't have to look exactly the same. But I think I've got enough horizontal lines, I've got enough vertical lines, and I've got enough arcs, and I've got my spirals. So I'm going to move the spiral under the polygon, and then I can say I'm pretty much done with my assignment, and then I can save it. Okay, so here is the assignment part 1, and it should take about half of your page. Again, don't worry in terms of the number of lines, but you should have a few vertical lines, a few horizontal lines, a few 45-degree angle lines, a few arcs. You should have the green spiral, and then you should have the other objects positioned and sized and recolored to as close as possible as your PDF. When you're done with this, you're just going to go to File, Save, or you can click on Command S or Control S, and then that'll save your file. So this concludes lesson number 3.